pretty heavy one this week, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Bit of a change from the Muppets.
Certainly was. But I'm going to say one of the best films we've seen so far.
Really?
Yeah. In a uncomfortable way.
I was slightly disappointed with it.
Well,
Not harrowing enough.
It was pretty harrowing.
what did you two think?
I don't actually have a thumbs up, thumbs down type opinion of it. I found it really engaging and I wasn't bored watching it.
Do you think it was a good film?
Yeah, but I think there's maybe been better representations of civil war and genocide. But yeah, good.
Amanda?
Yes, I liked it. And I think I liked it because it is different from other films that we've seen in the sense that I believe this is meant to be some kind of historical documentary, and I enjoy learning about history.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I'm happy every time that I'm aware of more things about it.
I think there's some controversy over the accuracy of it for tiny things. Not with the genocide, but I'm sure we'll get on to that.
Oh,
yeah, sure.
I never take movies to be a very. I never think that.
For some reason, I thought you were going to go the opposite way with that.
No, I never think of movies as being an accurate representation of an event. Nor do I take books nor anything to be completely accurate anyway.
Very sensible.
But I suppose it gives us a broad idea of what could have happened, or at least it makes us aware that something happened in Rwanda.
Yeah. If nothing else, this made me think more about something that I only really knew about in passing before.
So I did not know about this.
Yeah.
So it was completely
okay.
About the Rwandan genocide.
Exactly.
Oh, right. Interesting.
I guess we were all too young to be aware of it when it was happening. But vaguely.
What was it? Early 90s?
Yeah.
94.
Yeah, I was probably protected from it.
Yeah, you're probably not watching the news unfiltered at that point, were you?
No. I used to watch BBC or the Parliament Today or whatever it was.
Okay.
It doesn't surprise me. I just picture you as a small child watching Parliament Today.
When I got home from school, that's what my dad was watching.
Oh.
He used to teach me about who they all were.
That's good.
Awesome stuff.
Conservatories. But yeah, I don't imagine they would let me watch the news. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So my dad made me watch this film when I was about 11, 12.
What?
Okay.
And I haven't seen it since then, and I basically remembered nothing. Like, none of the scenes were really familiar to me in any way. So it was like watching it for the first time, which was nice.
Presumably because you've repressed the memories. That must have been quite traumatic as a child.
Oh, we watched a lot of it.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I built it up in my head as like an amazing, amazing film.
Right.
And it is a very good film, I think, but I don't know, I just was expecting a slightly more from it. I don't know why.
What were you expecting? What was missing?
I think maybe it didn't seem to like really
wrong?
drive home the emotional impact of what was happening. But maybe I'm just forgetting because it was a week ago since I've watched it and I don't have a good memory for these sorts of things. But maybe that's one of its strengths as well, is it doesn't really like play the violin strings too much. Or does it? I don't know. Stop me rambling. Someone please interrupt
I thought
me.
it did. I mean, I thought there was a lot of violence.
Well, there's a lot of violence, yeah.
I agree with Laura, and I think it's a good thing, which is that this was an absolutely horrifying event, and most of the film was set somewhere that, at least for the moment, was peaceful, and mostly we were never actually the narrative and the camera never actually entered a part of the worst massacres. We just saw it from the edge, or almost from this oasis in the centre of it, and so in a way it wasn't. They could have chosen to throw the characters into really explicit scenes of violence and killing, but they decided to tone it down a little bit. But we saw these things that had happened, and that sort of spoke for itself. I think it was somehow more effective or more engaging for me not to have just explicit horror on screen, but instead to have just it display the results of what has happened and make you think. We were forced to reconstruct these scenes in our own mind. We could see what had happened, and that in a way was just as chilling. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yes, I hadn't thought of that. Yes, I suppose.
But you thought it was violent.
Well, I did think it was violent, and yes, maybe we did see it from the point of view of the hotel, but we did get to see some scenes of violence and people being killed. Especially, I think of that time when the journalist was filming. Well, somebody had a footage from some killings, so we did see people being killed with a machete.
Yeah, we did.
I thought it was very violent.
And yeah, interesting that, again, we never saw that within the narrative. We saw a character playing it back on a camera that, again, had this sort of indirect... Certainly a sobering film to watch.
Yeah, do any of the characters who we're following, are any of them killed on screen? I can't think of any.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Because they beat up the guy in the back of the van, the people transporter.
Yeah.
Who Paul asks to look after his family. I assumed he was going to be killed when they dragged him off.
But he seemed to.
But he survived, didn't he?
Yeah, he got back to the hotel.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that...
What happens to... Oh no, Gregoire. Is it Gregoire? He just gets kind of like a bit slapped around by that general.
Yeah. What a prick.
And if they kept the gloves on a bit with showing us the murder, they didn't hold off on showing us the hatred. There was a lot of scenes where it was really shocking just seeing how much they hated the Tutsis and how cruel they were being.
As well as the road full of corpses.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
Which George sent him along deliberately.
Yeah.
Which is pretty sinister.
Cold.
Yeah, that if ever you want to send a message to someone.
Yeah. Terrible. Did you say that there were inaccuracies?
Well, disputes over some of the things that happened, which is that I think it's primarily the film was made from Paul Rusesabagina's, probably not pronouncing that right, his memoirs.
Paul,
yeah. Should have just gone with Paul. I decided to go for the whole.
Good try.
It was good. No, I appreciate it.
And some of the people who were there, I'm not really sure because it's from news sources that I don't really trust. Some of the people were saying that he, you know how in the film he's giving out fake bills? Well, they were saying that he did actually try and charge them, or did charge them, and would turn people away who couldn't pay him to stay in the hotel. So it was a bit more like mercenary, a little bit more like opportunistic than we saw. It wasn't just purely out of the goodness of his heart. So, but I think also one of the people who disputed it was the guy who was represented as Gregoire, who was saying, that's not how this happened, I've been demonised by it, and this is actually the guy himself wasn't a good person. So I think I don't know about definitive or what other witnesses have said anything like that.
There should have been more than 1,000 witnesses.
But maybe I just didn't look into the right sources and I have no idea what people were saying. Should have really looked a bit further before I brought it up. But I didn't.
I mean, it's always in any kind of war and dispute, there's always going to be different versions of stories, and even down to details like that, there's going to be different interpretations.
I wasn't sure until the end of the film whether he was just like Jack and Rose in Titanic, whether he was not even a real person at all.
Jack and Rose.
A smile just lit up your face for now.
I think we know what film Fernando's picking.
Oh, please don't, I'll cry for 3 days.
Yeah, no, we can't handle two in a row.
My emotional state, I don't. I do, I start crying.
Oh god, Titanic is so upsetting.
Just when
I say that this was a better one, Jess. It was obviously like far more. Well, not.
But as we say, they didn't pull the heartstrings so much in this one.
So, I've been trying to think why I'm so like unenthusiastic about it, and I found the motivations for the militants on all the sides difficult to understand. Because as far as I understood, basically the rebels wanted to rise up, and the military power, the Hutu, just wanted to kill all the Tutsi. But there were so many times they hesitated, didn't kill them. You know, like where people would be in a position of power and then not just kill the people. And I didn't understand why they were doing that. If your instruction is to go in and kill someone, you don't kind of. It was a bit like when, So in the scene where the one I mentioned before, where like they interrupt the convoy of the people getting out, and they're beating up the guy. And then there's 3 or 4 people in the back of the truck with machetes, and they want to just kill the 20 people that are there. So what would they?
So the military organisation, the paramilitary, was it the paramilitary? The police.
Yeah.
Were not officially part of the genocide of the thing, so it wasn't their motive to kill everyone. So they were going to there's a potential of them getting violent against the. Wait, I'm getting confused with my sources here. Right, so we had the police, just to make this a bit clearer. We had the police who were part of the official government, I think, who were not officially trying to kill all the Tutsis. And then we had a very large sort of civilian and sort of paramilitary force that did want to kill all the Tutsis. And they were trying to get into the vans, but the police stopped them.
Yes. And they were all wearing very bright colours and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Hutu power people.
Yeah. And so it was those guys in colourful shirts who got on the van and then didn't just kill this group of Tutsi. And I didn't understand why they didn't do that. I couldn't. It was like at the end of the film, at the end of a Bond film, when he stops to explain his amazing plan. It just felt like they were building tension and not. It's like, this is all built around massacre.
Yeah. And
they're playing on the fear of impending death rather than the horror of death. And I felt like that was maybe a decision in the filmmaking rather than in a representation of what would have happened.
I see.
I think there was a lot of psychological torture, though, of the Tutsis. It wasn't just a immediate kill kind of thing. Although I get what you're saying, that it maybe was a bit of narrative kind of decision to try and build tension. But
during that scene, he was asking them for identification, right? He was demanding to know who they were, and he had just been told by everyone in the UN, no, there are no Tutsis here. This is full of
political
refugees, so that they wouldn't have known whether a lot of the people in that truck were in fact Hutus, and perhaps would at least have tried to check, and he was yelling, trying to intimidate her into giving him her name, her identity, and find out whether any of them were Tutsis.
Like, I just didn't feel like that was... Like, this band of rebels are suddenly demanding official identification. Just, I don't know, just little decisions like that just didn't sit right with me. No.
Okay. It seemed realistic to me that they would have taken precautions not to kill any Hutus unless they were confirmed as collaborators. But yeah, perhaps you're right that they overdid. They were trying to inject drama, perhaps.
Yeah, and it's already a pretty horrible situation. I don't feel like you need to.
I suppose that's the difficulty with any film that deals with that kind of like just horrendous subject matters. That the decisions that you make are very sensitive. So you're trying to like purposefully build a narrative around it. Where sorry, I'm not very articulate today. I don't know what's happening.
Okay. I see what you mean. Were there any other inaccuracies that you were aware of?
One small one, which was that they said that the Tutsi and Hutu divide was
imposed by the Belgians.
Yes, which it was.
So this is something I looked up as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just that I think they said that it was purely picked out. The Belgians, that the Belgians came up with it based on like facial features and things like that would distinguish Hutus from Tutsis, but it pre-existed. You probably find this out. Pre-existed the Belgians, but it was a system of like class and caste, so you could move between the two. It was just a system of
right.
And then when the Belgians came, they decided that they made it sort of more inflexible. You couldn't move between them, and they also issued identification cards with Hutu or Tutsi on them, so that it was set in stone. Is that pretty much what you learned?
Yeah. And I that surprised me a little bit because thinking back to it, the people who were it was one particular character was saying that in the film, that this whole thing is completely artificial and the Belgians invented it. And I heard that as, this is the voice of reason in the film, this is the filmmakers telling us that this is what happened. But actually, perhaps that was just that character's point of view. And yeah, certainly, as you say, the Belgians
I think they were trying to express...
drum that in.
Yeah, just very succinctly express that this is the Belgians' fault.
Yeah.
Which it entirely is. Yeah. Like, the second message of this film is that colonialism has just wreaked such terrible, terrible violence on...
Absolutely. But there we couldn't say entirely, because this was a distinction that existed beforehand and was at least tied up with race. I think for many centuries it had been a bit more structured as to you couldn't move between these classes, and only later on it became a bit more flexible. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think, well, they were... There really are genetic differences between Hutus and Tutsis on the whole, and there's a lot of evidence of intermarriage and stuff, but yeah, they were the ruling class. It was like the Normans and the Saxons in England. The Tutsis were a minority, a sort of 15% minority that was in charge, and all the kings and many of the councillors and advisors were all Tutsis, and the Hutu were the peasants, essentially, of this pre-colonial kingdom. But yeah, then a little later on, particularly when that kingdom was expanding, they kind of redefined Hutu to mean kind of anyone who's in the lower class, and if somebody works their way up, they can become Tutsi, and if somebody is Tutsi and does something wrong or ends up destitute, they become Hutu. But yeah, then as you say, the Belgians brought it utterly back to race, and brought in all this specific measuring of noses and height and stuff. Particularly
is that
horrible.
Is that true? The nose measuring thing?
I
That
think so,
just seems so absurd.
Yeah,
a
Hutus
lot
had
of colonialists, powers did that sort of thing.
It makes sense if you want to subjugate a people and you don't care about their human rights. You pick up pick up a group that's already in power and you ally yourself to them, put yourself in control if you're a colonial power, and it's a particularly horrible example of it. Yeah, but as we saw all the way through the film, they couldn't tell who was Hutu and who was Tutsi because it's not at all clear, and they had to check identity cards to figure out which was which, and that's
So shit.
troublesome.
And the French, like, arming and financing the violent military organisation.
Yeah.
Got a nice little surprise from Leon, though.
Yes,
Ah.
didn't expect that. Did you recognise Leon the professional?
Was he there?
He was the man that Paul phoned.
Oh,
In-
okay, yes. I
Brussels.
thought he was familiar, and I was like, I feel like I've seen him before.
That was him. And I think playing a similarly heart in the right place, but just slightly hopeless and weak in the end character.
I was also reminded that I will never know what Joaquin Phoenix looks like. Because I didn't know it was him until the credits.
Me neither.
Right.
I do know who Joaquin Phoenix is.
Yeah. Well.
He does have a generic white man face, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, white people all look the same.
Or as he put it, black women all look the same.
Oh yes, he said, you two could be twins.
Yeah. Two completely different women.
Yeah, he was an interesting character, wasn't he? Because he was drunk for quite a bit of it, wasn't he? And he was sort of angry and acting out, but basically was just jaded about how cruel the world is, and was trying to do what he thought was right. But yeah, he was an odd one.
The other cameo was the reporter being Harry Potter's alter ego in the Ministry for Magic. Do you know when they use Polyjuice potion?
Was that the reporter?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't recognise him.
I wouldn't have remembered.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quite a few little...
No idea who Joaquin Phoenix is, but the guy that Harry Potter turns into when he goes into the Ministry of Magic, him I can recognise.
Yeah.
There's a lot of... The white people were presented quite nicely, I thought, which was like a bit of a...
Yeah.
Like, they all were trying their best, weren't they? They were all good people who were going, what a shame, they're trying their best there.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good decision to make the UN person Canadian and not American.
I think he was Canadian.
Was it? Or was it an actual based on a person?
Yeah, it's based on a person.
Because I just wouldn't have believed that of like American military.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the Canadian military, they'll be trying to keep the peace.
Okay.
And that's absurd. Like,
Yeah.
I think another thing I read was that was quite a good portrayal of him, although overacted, perhaps.
Okay.
But he did genuinely try really hard with like his governments to get them to intervene more.
I can
think
believe
was
that.
it that he like knew about a cache of weapons and wanted to be able to go in and like intervene more, but he was stopped by the.
Right.
Again, I should really have double checked all these facts. But
So, I mean, sorry, go on.
No, please.
I can believe that people who have been posted in a place for months or years as part of a UN peacekeeping mission are going to be the ones who are trying their best to make things okay, and it seemed realistic to me that whenever they were acting unfairly and coldly, it was because they had orders from somebody many thousands of miles away without the same perspective that they had to follow. And that was kind of sad, and maybe rubbed in that frustration that all of the whites, as they called them, that all of them that they were talking to were really good and were trying their best, but all the ones who were just out of sight just didn't care, and there was just bureaucracy just stopping anything from happening, and that was a bit heartbreaking.
It was just awful when it was like, on, we can do it in like 2 days. And it can happen in, 36 hours time. You're like, it needs to happen now. Like, I know you've got paperwork to fill in. Can you just do that afterwards, mate? Like,
what were you going to say, Fernando?
I was just curious as what happened afterwards. So what is the current state of affairs in Rwanda?
So this is something I read as well. Did you read about this?
Not really. I've read bits and bobs in actually one of my undergraduate modules I teach on. But you go first.
Oh, you can mark my work. As we saw at the end of the film, the Rwandan Patriotic Force, which were the Tutsi rebels, who had been exiled from the country for 20 years at that point, they got in and managed to capture the capital city, and that was why they were safe in the end, and they were able to get out. They eventually went on to win that war because they had the backing of the USA, and I think France and Belgium withdrew their support for the Hutu-led army. So in the end, the Tutsi rebels managed to take over the whole country, and the bottom line is that they're still in power, in the sense that the guy who was in charge of the Rwandan Patriotic Force established a government, and that government has stayed in power since. But what he did was then take power, and he wasn't completely. He wasn't a model leader at all times, but he did make serious efforts to reconcile the two sides of this ethnic divide.
How did he? What were the attempts that were made?
He drove all the paramilitaries out, and unfortunately killed many of them. But the other thing he did was he invited a lot of Hutus to join his army, and made a big point of it being the Rwandan people, and a big point of this not being an ethnic idea. And he has since made a fairly serious rulings, I think fairly strict rulings, that the race of Hutu and Tutsi is something that you're not supposed to talk about in Rwanda now. You're not allowed to ask someone. It's at least extremely rude, and at worst illegal to ask someone whether they're Hutu or Tutsi. The line is, we are all just Rwandan now. So he made genuine efforts to do that, and he's still the president, and this is 25 years later, and he's won 3 or 4 elections, all of which had some kind of intimidation and some unfairness going on, but he hasn't had to, I think, do anything too extreme to stay in power, and it seems that he genuinely has the support of a lot of the population. And it's a moderately safe place to live now. Is that fair?
I think so.
Why wouldn't France and Belgium be interested in supporting the Hutu side?
Why would they, or why wouldn't they?
Why would they be interested?
So when Belgium was in charge until the mid-60s, I think 1967, they eventually gave independence to Rwanda. Yeah, very recent. And when they did, it was because there was an uprising by the Tutsi, who were their collaborators in colonialism, but it was the Tutsi who were pushing for independence. So they turned against the Tutsi during the 1960s, during that whole struggle for independence, and then eventually Rwanda became independent, and I'm not quite sure why they continued to back the Hutus after that. But certainly they had gone against the Tutsis during that uprising.
I imagine they use the same argument a lot of Western powers do, which is that they left the Hutu in charge as a government, and then the Tutsi at that point were rebels, and they were just arming the government against rebels.
Yeah, that sounds likely.
I don't know what their motivation for that would be, though, if they weren't in charge of the country either way. I don't know why
that happens all the time. You support a government against a rebellion. Think about, like, Syria and stuff in a minute.
Oh, so I see.
It's just, that's the official government. We support them.
Yeah, okay.
And there's a military rebellion.
Oh, I suppose that also makes sense. Another thing that the movie made me think was, well, it made me question what to do. And I wondered if some people were thinking of fleeing the country in search of somewhere else more peaceful to live. And then I thought of all the immigrants that are fleeing their country in Central America. And I was like, I think even though I've heard this argument, and I've heard the argument, they're fleeing violence, I think it made a little bit more sense now, just because I had seen some scenes of violence that previously I had only theoretically heard of. And I was like, this is very violent. I see why people would like to leave their country.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to imagine it being that bad. Like, when you hear fleeing violence, you think, the police are probably roughing people up a little bit. Yeah. You don't think,
Real
people are
disasters.
arriving with machetes and hacking down their children. Right.
Yeah, pretty bad.
So I think the article that we read in Anthropology was on the nature of the aftermath, and again, like, this Western forces coming in and thinking they're doing really well by adhering to kind of like Western ways of dealing with trauma, which is to make everyone speak about it very openly and like address wounds of the past and things like that. So they had refugee camps that had like Hutus, perpetrators of like rape and things like that, and they're trying to like make the women confront. I'm not sure. Again, this was many years ago that I read this, but it was just one of those other things that it continued, like this sort of very Western, like colonial ideas of, or not colonial ideas.
So who was making that happen?
I think it was the UN. But I need to double check. But you know that we do have this idea of like how to deal with trauma, which is to open up and examine things that happen, work through them, process them.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not a universal way of dealing with trauma and can actually cause like massive damage to dredge everything up again.
Oh, this is dredging up things for individual people and telling them you should confront these things that have happened to you. Right. Yeah, what would be the correct thing to do?
I don't know about the correct thing, but I think that we can recognise that that's quite a cultural thing that might not just easily map onto something, especially where it's so horrific, like genocide and mass rape and mass killings and
there's
mutilations
mass,
and things.
isn't it? So there must be a mass solution, which is so it's not worth thinking that there might be some individuals who need to deal with things differently. It seems so simple from an office, on a bit of paper. Like, talking therapy. That worked for me when my dog died, so that'll probably work.
That's the other thing I would critique the film of, was the kind of rosy ending it gave the family, which I also don't. I think there was some disputes over how accurate that was as well. Apparently
For
the
that
camps were
particular
just
family.
the camps that they had were horrific.
Right.
Whereas we kind of saw like education, things were really
like a holiday
organised.
camp,
There was a
didn't
little hospital, things like that. But I think it was a lot more brutal
Okay.
than that. And then it ends nicely with them all being reunited,
pulled
and
another
off
punch.
they go to wherever. Yeah.
And on a larger scale, the result at the end of that conflict fed into fighting in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, and ended up creating feeding into two giant wars that were happening there, with the result of many hundreds of thousands of people more also dying. It wasn't quite over, though maybe the worst of it was.
That's interesting. So when the letters come through and the Canadian UN colonel arrives and says he's got the list of people who are going to get out and where they're going, I'm sure he says one of them's gone to Congo.
I think he does, yeah.
Oh,
Which presumably, from what you've just said, doesn't exist.
there's also the Republic of Congo, which is different from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay, so the Republic of Congo did exist.
I believe so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that would have been glaring.
It's amazing to think how the film was made so quickly after it happened. Like, a space of a few years.
It was 10 years later, wasn't it?
Was it 10 years later?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was
I think it was 2004.
Still, though,
the
that's pretty
1994 thing. Yeah. Yeah, what would it be like now? What happened in 2009?
Yeah, 2004.
Sure. I guess it'd be like a film about the Arab Spring now.
Jeez.
Probably some films were made about the terrorist attacks in New York City in 2001.
Yeah. Yeah, how many films have been made about that? In 2011, they probably were doing stuff like that, weren't they?
Actually, yeah, I guess
Well,
a decade is
Are
reasonable.
there films about 9/11?
I think there are maybe not any good films about 9/11, so we don't...
I watched one that was a surprise film about 9/11. Didn't know it was about 9/11 till the end. Jesus Christ.
Oh, was that Remember Me?
Yeah.
God.
Wait, was that what it's called? The one with Robert Pattinson and...
Yeah, you shouldn't tell me in that way.
Oh, I know, yeah.
That's okay.
Ruined.
I think I'll be okay if I never see a surprise film about 9/11. Yeah, how long do you need to wait before you can make a film about something? Is it distasteful to make one too early?
I guess, no, it depends who you are and why you're making it, I think. Surely to spread like awareness of what happened and the horrors of what happened. It's reasonable to make a film about it.
Yeah.
I don't actually know who even directed this. I should have looked that up.
I guess to some extent you lack perspective, don't you? If you don't have the full
Always
context
need
of...
objective perspective when you're dealing with things.
We're going to start again, aren't we?
Do we ever have objective perspective on anything, or are we all just funneling our... Also, I had a point about our conversation last time, which is...
which is... Miss Piggy was definitely crossing a line.
Yes, that... well, we'll see. But museums.
What about museums?
Display artifacts.
Point of that they are the primary institutions of preserving culture, but everything in it has been robbed by colonialists from other countries. So
maybe not everything in it, but yeah, certainly a lot.
big fan of that, are we? No, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, mate, I can't believe you think we should steal artifacts from other cultures, Michael, and put them on display in museums.
You bastard. Yeah. No, sorry. I thought that might be good, a point for leaving things as they are and not having like these in anything in the name of science to preserve. But anyway, let's not get back onto this now. Just unless you want to counter.
No, I think to a great extent you're correct, and the fact that we have things in museums that were just totally stolen from powerless people in the past is a pretty sad
even if
state
that
of
object
affairs.
would have been degraded and lost had we left it.
And that's the other side, and that's why I'm not entirely against the idea of preserving things in museums.
Even though they've been stolen.
And it's when I see shit like the guy that snapped off Tutankhamun's beard by accident when he was cleaning it, and I just thought like, why did this happen? Why didn't they give it to me? I'd have kept it really safe. I'd have done a good job with it. Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry, what were we talking about before that?
Genocide.
Genocide.
Yeah, so they waited 10 years and then made the film. I guess that's long enough to have some distance from it.
one of the arguments that Robert S. Mueller made about his investigation, the metrocratic investigation, I think he mentioned that one of the arguments about gathering so much information that perhaps are not directly related to the thing that he was investigating is just to keep records while memories are fresh of certain events.
That's a good point.
And sorry, and what's the name of the person you said?
I believe his name is Robert Mueller.
Who's that?
Oh,
he's investigating Trump.
He was investigating.
Okay. Is that relevant? So it's a good idea to make this film.
I'm sorry. This is related to the question whether it would be appropriate to make a movie this recent, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
And I was like, well, maybe it is, just so that we can ask as many people as we can, just to ask them what happened according to you, and we have many records, and maybe those representations would be perhaps a little bit more accurate, given that not so much time has passed.
Sure.
Whereas it might be a little bit difficult to remember all the things that happened once a lot of time has passed.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like when you watch... Do you ever watch The World at War? It's a seminal documentary series made in the 1970s about the Second World War. And when you watch Second World War documentaries now, they are a bit dispassionate, and they are historical documentaries where they might as well be talking about the Tudors. But in The World at War, they have the generals who were involved in it, and they have people from both sides talking about what they were thinking while they were doing it, and it's so much more
interesting,
so much more engaging, and so much more, better in many ways to get it sort of from the horse's mouth. Yeah, while the memories are still exist and while they're fresh. Yeah, perhaps that's something to be said for this.
What did we think of Paul as a character?
I loved him.
Oh.
I thought he was just so good. He was, in a film about the world gone mad, he was a bastion of sanity, and he always, well, as far as possible, as far as any human can, he kept a clear head and did what he had to do. But he couldn't always handle it, and I was so heartbroken whenever I saw him breaking down. But he was, it was really good to have a pure, good man, a good protagonist. What did you two think?
3.
And you?
I liked him, but I got the sense that he was incredibly resistant to letting anyone into the hotel pretty much all the way through. Even at the end, I think, well, no, he grew obviously more and more insistent on protecting everyone, but mostly when his guests had gone, I think.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a fair point. What do you guys think?
Mostly when guests were gone.
He had to keep that pretense of being a luxury hotel, though, to keep the Belgian funders on side.
Yeah, I just, for some reason, in my memory of it, now that it was well over a week ago, it wasn't even just about the pretense, it was that he genuinely was quite resistant to, I've got no space for these people.
I think there's something in that.
Deal with it, send them somewhere else.
I mean, yeah, he said that earlier as well. Like, he didn't want to cash in favours for neighbours. He had worked very hard to build a relationship so that he could save his family if he ever needed to.
Yeah.
He wasn't this altruistic character who was just doing all this selflessly. I think once he realised he had to, it was a moral imperative.
We did, though, then, I guess.
We saw him grow in that way.
Yeah.
Sent his family off and couldn't bear to leave the people behind at the hotel.
Yeah.
Unlike
completely opposite to
ministers and nuns who just, take the children. By then.
There was just one minister who stayed, right? We saw him get back in the car.
Forced off. Oh, did he?
Oh, I thought they all went.
I thought that they had all gone, and then we saw just one of them getting back into a bus and driving off.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Was he black?
No, he was the one of the white ones.
Okay.
I think.
Because there were definitely, like, nuns left behind.
Maybe I've got that wrong.
Because, white people are worth saving.
From their point of view, you can see why they would do that, right? If it's,
From whose point of view?
if you, from the ministers who are fleeing, you've got to think, like, we're in a terrible situation here, and I can get out either way. I can't save these people. There'd be a temptation just to go, wouldn't there?
But then we saw Paul had his chance to go where he could do nothing and decided to stay because
I suppose
there was a chance maybe he could.
He was
I don't know,
stronger, yeah.
Yeah, he did
It would
have
be
more
sorely
power.
tempting anyway.
I mean, I'd
wouldn't
be
it?
on the bus.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I
First
guess
chance.
I would. I'd like to say that I would be the one who
Yeah,
would stay behind
maybe.
and do what I could, but I suppose I'll never know. I hope I will never know.
I think that was one of the most hard-hitting points of the film was when they evacuated all the white people. And it just doesn't it just get into your blood of how unfair
yeah.
and angry that.
And he was so angry, wasn't he? That they told me I was one of them, and I
Yeah.
believed it, and it was just all a lie.
Yeah.
But we see that, don't we? That's on the news. If there's ever civil unrest in holiday destinations, it's like, but we've brought all the tourists home so everyone can stop panicking. All right, that's good. What about the 5 million people left in the country
Yeah, sure.
that don't have the protection of the UK? Yeah.
Well, that one's kind of the opposite situation in a way, because I think the idea, like, if there's been a attack by a terrorist group or something, anybody from a Western country who's in there is a massive target and is very liable to be kidnapped and to be ransomed, whereas not everybody who lives in that country is necessarily in so much danger. Whereas I think in the film we just watched, actually the Tutsis were the ones in danger and the white people were not targets, and that they had a better chance, that they would have done better to evacuate Tutsis.
Maybe, although I do feel like that maybe that's kind of the way that the media portrays it, which is that white people are more of a target, when actually the main victims of terrorism are not white people. They're the people who live in the countries where it happens. So it's one of those difficult things. But I think you've got
I'm
a
trying
point.
to think of like the civil wars that have been happening along like the Arab Spring, like people getting flown home from Egypt and things like that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't because white people were a target, was it?
Oh, I mean, some of the stuff that's happened in Egypt was attacks on Christian churches. It was a firm. I mean, often these attacks are by Islamist groups, right? Who,
Yeah, but was that the case in Egypt though?
sadly, there have been a few different things in Egypt. I can at least think of one thing. There were loads of attacks on churches, Christian churches in Egypt. And yeah, certainly that they are. Yeah, statements of like radical thinking that attacks non-Muslims, and therefore most people, the Muslim majority in the country, is relatively safe compared to foreign tourists who are more likely to be Christians or atheists.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
I can't remember the exact details of like the last big civil unrest there.
yeah, okay.
I just felt like it was more, there's a civil war going on, bring the boys home, sort of thing.
Oh yeah, the one sort of 8 years ago, it was a popular uprising, wasn't it, against the government?
Yeah, with Mubarak and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that was more a case of just, this is looking a bit hairy, guys.
Yeah,
Everyone come home if you don't live there.
yeah, exactly.
But I think there weren't huge numbers of people trying to get out. There weren't lots of refugees trying to leave the country at that point.
But they should have been allowed. Who were scared.
Yep. What was I going to say? Oh, there were. It was a film similar in many ways to Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
in the sense not only that it was a massive genocide was the backdrop, but also I feel like Schindler was very similar to Paul. Is that fair?
Reluctant sort of hero who then rises to the occasion.
Yeah, and at the start he's just wants to save like a couple of people and doesn't want to get involved. And by the end, we saw Paul leap off the truck and abandon his own family because he was hoping that he could help a few more people. I think at the end of Schindler's List, he's just in tears. He just feels utterly accountable and feels like he's in the debt of the people he's trying to save. And he says, "Look at this watch. I could have sold this for however many marks. I could have got another one or two people. I'm such a monster that I didn't do more."
True,
though. Not easy, though. And yeah, I suppose that Schindler's List came out around the time this thing was really happening in Rwanda, right? But there must have been an influence there, the filmmaker. Maybe.
I have not seen the film.
You have not seen Schindler's List?
Yeah, comparable to Hotel Rwanda.
That is hard.
Yeah, it's a tougher watch.
I just weep all the way through that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
I mean, this was like obviously the subject matter is. I thought, why do I keep comparing these things?
I must also apologise, but I do not know what the Arab Spring is.
Oh, do you want to?
No, it's right. North Africa and
the Middle East.
Yeah, the Middle East. Yeah.
When did it happen? Is it something that is going on?
It was about 10 years ago. There were a lot of rebellions and governments being overthrown, and
it was a sort of popular uprising in Arab countries against generally sort of established dictators in favour of democracy, and some countries it was completely overthrown and replaced with something, and in other countries there were some concessions made and a few more liberties given. And I think overall, like some of the countries are better off now, and some of them are maybe worse because military governments have got involved and stuff. And one example of the countries is Syria, which was not a quick uprising that went away, but a terrible civil war that's still continuing. Is that a fair summary of the Arab Spring?
We're still supporting the Syrian president.
No.
Assad.
No, we're supporting the rebels,
who
are nearly defeated now.
Oh.
I thought we were supporting Assad.
The
US
Russians are supporting Assad.
Who are we? I don't know. I forgot.
It's so complicated. There are graphs with 30 different points on who's supporting who, because there are like 5 different factions inside the country. It's so complicated. But yeah, the UK recognises the Syrian Free Army, which is the rebels, and no longer recognises Assad as the legitimate leader, and that's been the case since it started.
Alright.
But again, the Russians are the trouble. And we never intervened because of Iraq, mostly, and people didn't want us to get involved in another Middle Eastern war because we saw it as the wrong thing to do. David Cameron wanted to get involved, and that was I think the first time he was ever defeated in Parliament. Was Parliament saying we shouldn't get involved?
Oh, and Hilary Benn gave that great speech.
Oh yeah, against getting involved.
In favour of getting involved.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry, it was. Yeah, it was the opposite of Tony Benn, his father. Yeah. Yeah, so that's, in a way, that's the question I was asking in this film. When is it appropriate for Western powers to intervene in the internal affairs of other countries? Because
it's a very difficult question.
It's so difficult. But I think it's clear that anyone watching the film was wishing that the Western powers had intervened and stopped this from happening.
I mean, they are accountable for it, like because of colonialism is what's happened. But
yeah, so there's even a responsibility.
Yeah.
Should they have done something sooner? Should we have done something in Syria? Should we have not done something in Iraq? It's just...
I feel like we know we shouldn't have gone to Iraq.
Yeah, I feel like as well, because there was so much dodgy evidence that was on the reason for us going, but also, thank God, I've even forgot his name. The old
Saddam Hussein.
Thank God Saddam Hussein is gone. He was a really dreadful man who was doing terrible things in his country.
Didn't we put him in power, though?
No. We fought the Gulf War against him.
I feel like he
withdrew.
initially came up because we... I say we.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think it was the British.
Maybe not me.
I think, the British installed him. He was keeping the Middle East stable.
Right. Yeah, you can sacrifice a lot for a bit of stability, can you? But yeah, so perhaps we're even more responsible, so we had even more of a responsibility to remove him.
And that's the point, isn't it? Like, you can't just keep thinking... It's like that island you were talking about, where they introduced the rats to get rid of the flies, and then the rats took over. And, like, how about you just don't interfere in the first place?
But if something's already fucked up...
it's better to be morally strong on these points and just say we shouldn't have interfered. Sorry.
No, I'm thinking of another example, which I'm not sure if it is similar, but I don't think it is similar to the ones that you've said. But, for example, I believe that the people in Venezuela are having a crisis with their president. And I don't think that at least anyone in Europe is to blame. Or maybe they are.
Like, historically.
So, should people try and help in a situation or not?
So, what is it happening in Venezuela?
So I also do not know exactly what is happening, but I believe that the government is acting against its own people in a way that they can no longer provide them with sustenance, and also they have a problem with hyperinflation, so that basically the money that they have is worth nothing, and so they can't buy anything.
Oh yeah, I was listening to this on the radio, where you go into the shop with 100,000.
Yes, exactly. So you basically have stacks of bills, but they're basically worthless.
Like we saw in Hotel Rwanda, where you just said Rwandan francs and threw it on the floor.
Drove over it.
Yeah.
Symbolically. The worthlessness of money.
So yeah, I don't know who has a responsibility to intervene in Venezuela.
Did you just conflict the bell?
Sorry, I just wanted to wrap that up before.
The bell was rung.
wanted to wrap that up before we start talking about bullshit. No, was there symbolism? We got any good ones?
Apart from driving over the money.
There's
military trucks driving over the money.
I think there's something that is the money is like the symbol of the country, right? Yeah.
I'm sure there was quite a lot of symbolism.
Can we say that Paul...
I'm saying it's bullshit. I'm just not very good at spotting it.
Is like Jesus.
Yeah. He did try to, didn't he?
Just to sacrifice himself, at least to some extent.
So I thought it was interesting when he did have a breakdown as he was changing. So when he got home from visiting George, and he couldn't do his tie up, like he'd messed up his tie, and that was very much part of what he'd been doing, was putting on a front.
Yeah.
Like, a horrific thing happens.
Yeah.
You put your shirt and tie on, you go out and you be the professional. Not Leon, the professional. He's in Belgium.
Yep.
But it was interesting, right, that the front of his tie was too short. Like, he was losing that ability to pretend and to put on this face, and that he was just, like, the smartness and the formality comes from how that tie looks and how the front is, like, significantly bigger than what's behind it. And that's when he broke down. It was too much for him at that point. There was just too much going on. behind that face. So I was trying to read into the tie. That was the best I could come up with.
That was nice. I like that.
Symbol.
I think that's probably on the money there.
Yeah, that sounds legit.
Yeah. I think also we had very tenuously the drinking the pool water because they'd run out of water, and then later on, is it George or one of the other men refers to whiskey that they want to drink as the water of life.
Oh, it's yeah.
Just the stark contrast between what's a luxury and what's what they are desperate to get the whiskey.
Sure.
Yeah.
How did we feel about that policeman, like the chief of police?
I think he was pretty for the genocide. That's what I was reading into it, even though he couldn't take
definitely seemed to be.
He had a pretense of not being that involved in, but he definitely made many derogatory remarks about Tutsis and refused to get involved unless there was something directly in it for him.
Yeah, and it seemed that his orders were restraining him. If anything, he was the opposite of the commissioner in Fiddler on the Roof, who was trying to do as little as he could to hurt people. He was doing as much as he could to attack
but within the rules.
Yeah, but he was part of the Hutu government, part of this army that was very much fighting the Tutsi rebels. Sorry?
He was nice to Paul.
He was, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, troubling ally to have.
Came and saved him a few times.
Hero. It was at least interesting, though, that he wasn't entirely a monster. He had motivations, and those motivations sometimes stopped him from doing terrible things, because Paul said, "You need me to..." He was at least willing to listen to that. So yeah, I hated him is the answer, but he was a good villain, I guess.
I found him compelling.
Yeah,
as
he
a
was
character.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching him. I loved it when he threw the bucket of ice.
When did he throw the bucket of ice?
On Gregoire.
Oh, yeah.
Did you like him?
I mean...
Or how much did you hate him?
I mean, I thought it was a good character, but yes, I do not know. I also thought he was a terrible person. Had he had good intentions, then why was he so... Why didn't he ask for payment? And it was very, very clearly corrupt, I think, because everything that he did, everything that he asked for payment, it was just for himself, not for the art, not for the soldiers.
Yeah, we saw, didn't we, that this corruption and bribery was just a part of everyday life.
Yeah, right from the start, it was very clear.
And we even got his story about how he got his wife transferred to be near him by
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen. I hope it was a new one. They were very sweet, weren't they? As a couple. I loved them.
Yeah, the one moment I hated, I think I mentioned this to you, was when they'd just got back from being ambushed, and she was so clearly upset with him for not abandoning her, but leaving her when he promised never to. And his solution to this was to force a hug upon her, like someone who's angry and frustrated and upset. It's like, she needs comfort. I shall comfort her. Hug. And it's like, do you ever think that maybe you should just not physically restrain her while she's upset and against her will? And, it made me so uncomfortable even watching it. Just yes, you're physically stronger. Well done. That is not comforting. I can understand your need to comfort her, but that does not make that okay. And that was the only point for me that was just respond to signals if you want to comfort someone.
I think a couple of times we saw his sexism, right? He viewed himself as the leader of that relationship and the leader of his family. And maybe that was just another example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts in your book, Claire?
Oh, my book.
Or anyone else?
I don't think so. I think I've said much everything.
A lot of my notes were just trying to keep track of what the sides were.
Oh. Thank you for the choice. I think it was a really good one.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I've had this at the back of my head as a film I should watch one day. I think it was a good way to do it.
Cool.
Yeah, the only other comment I've got is that the medic saying, "Who's going to take 20 Rwandan orphans?" And it just seems like such a small request. Like, when she tries to drop them off, she's like, "Oh, who else is going to take 20?"
Yeah.
Like, oh. I don't know, a small primary school.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a big ask.
Mm.
But in the circumstances, apparently it was.
Yeah. Ah, dear.
I thought that was quite a powerful line.
Yeah.
Okay. Especially when we know that 10,000 times that number, or
Well, it was like 50,000, wasn't it? Okay.
were killed in the Rwandan genocide.
Yeah.
Oh, more like 1 million.
Was it that?
It was truly huge.
Alright, okay.
For who are you talking about? They're just kids. What were
I
you
don't know, it was just a number I'd seen at some point, or someone said at some point.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I don't know how many children died or
Yeah.
anything like that, but it was around 900,000 people. And this is a country of about 8 million population at the time, I think.
It's horrific, isn't it?
Maybe a little more. Yeah.
I'd quite like to watch Shooting Dogs at some point, which I think is another film about the Rwandan genocide. But with John Hurt.
Okay.
I almost picked it, but I
Haven't
heard
heard
that
it.
this one was slightly better, so I picked it.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we could. Maybe we'd see another side of
Maybe
it.
from now I'll just pick films about genocide. And I'll put
I mean,
my
1
name.
in 4. I will probably respond to that by trying to lighten up my picks a bit.
You did that last time.
Yeah, probably the Muppets, or maybe even a bit darker than the Muppets. I'd be happy with.
Okay.
Sorry.
What's
Right.
darker than the Muppet? Sorry, shall I play the music? Does anyone else
I guess
have any
so.
final?
No, it was a good film. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important.
It did not feel like it was 2 hours and 2 minutes long.
I suppose it was quite long.
Yeah, but it was so entertaining that I.
Yeah, I didn't really notice the time
Oh,
passing
okay.
too much either.
Thanks.